Welcome back to the Stay Introverted Podcast. I am your co-host, Jay Coleman.
And I'm your other co-host, Steph Laffey.
And as always, we're going to start off by just saying thank you for joining us on this podcasting journey with Steph and I, just a couple of introverts talking stuff. Me on one podcast, her on 85 million, but you know.
Okay, you know what? You don't have to shade me in front of a guest. Okay, we have a friend here today.
No shade. You just, I got one and done.
One and done. I'm normally one and done, but enough about me, enough about you. Let's introduce our guest here.
All right. Yeah, very special guest. Very special guest today. Hailing from the left coast, aka the West Coast, Miss Tamara Sellman. Welcome,
Hey,
welcome.
thank you. Thanks for having me. This is really fun. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you.
Definitely. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You know, starting off with the main question: Are you an introvert?
Yes, I am an introvert, but I'm an extroverted introvert. And people are gonna go, what is that? So we'll talk about that today because it's possible. And Steph reached out to me in Threads, and I just want to say thank you. We were having an interesting conversation, I think, in Threads about what that means to be extroverted and introverted at the same time. So, but I definitely identify first and foremost as an introvert. And there's the question I'm sure you guys have gone over a million times, but are introverts born or made? And I think they're a little bit of both. I'm a very creative person, come from a very creative family. I think by the very nature of being a creative person, you kind of crave introversion because you need that quiet space and the some control over your environment so you're not completely disrupted by all the things so that you can focus on the thing that you're creating. So I'm a writer. I also do all kinds of things. I'm a gardener. I like to make jewelry sometimes. I'm a poet. I just made my first ever film, little tiny film.
Nice.
I can draw sometimes if I try. I used to be a singer, so yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it runs in my family, and my children are also creative. They, have a little bit of me in there too. So um the second part of my introversion, I think, comes from being raised in a family that was not a healthy family situation. So I, being the only girl in a not very female friendly environment, really had to feel or felt like I needed to be very small to be safe. All right. And so childhoods can do that to you. They can shape who you are as you become an adult. And for me, there was a lot of just be quiet and walk the eggshells and don't, don't make a noise, or don't poke the bear, I should say. And so that can kind of make you an introvert because you're safer just by trying to be invisible, really. Um, I'm also neurodivergent in a couple of different ways. And so I think it just kind of comes with that territory and it's funny, I don't know that I have a lot of social anxiety, which is a big part of it, but there are some neurological structures in my brain that don't work exactly in the same way, so I'm not typical. And so that can lead to some sense of being an introvert. It's just easier for me to, be quiet and step away and not be part of crowds. I don't like crowds. I never have liked crowds. Other things. And then I'm a bit of an empath, I guess. So I have been described as a highly sensitive person. And when you're in that kind of position, you're really vulnerable if you don't know how to deal with it, by the fact that you can bump up against other people's energy and absorb it, and it can just overwhelm you. It's a kind of stimulation that's not something you can see, but you can feel it. And so, again, a reason why I don't like to do crowds, or if it's crowds, it's outside where you can, like maybe make some space for yourself. Having too many people talking and too many sounds and smells and visuals, all of that stuff just like shuts me down. So, Steph, you were talking earlier about if your words, you know, if you stop speaking for a little bit because you've had such a busy day on the phone. I get that. Actually, one of my symptoms for one of my conditions is aphasia, in which I just can't speak. Words don't come. And I think that I'm speaking, but I literally don't speak. I literally cannot form words, even if I hear them in my head. It's a weird thing. So that's a little bit different from being introverted, but it's probably a reason why people, think of me as sort of shut down, because I really am kind of trapped inside my head a little bit. So there's different ways to be introverted. Some of them are pushed upon you by other people or the externals, and then some of them are you just born that way. I crave my retreat time and space and my quiet time. I absolutely love being by myself. So when I was a mother, that was, my kids were great. I got lucky. I had really good kids, but still just sharing space and home with all that pent up energy, creative energy could be a lot. So I'm also a writer. And so when they were little, I would take myself on writing retreats and just go where there was no TV, or if there was, it never went on, right? No music even. And it was just like a cabin, literally a cabin in the woods, or, some Airbnb somewhere on a beach, maybe. And I would be gone for anywhere from like 4 to 7 days. And I would just shut myself down and just read and write and just have the silence. And so I love it when I see, the little memes like in social media where people are like, oh, I'm not going to get out of bed, but it's okay, because I get that. I love that. I love that. But, the problem with that is you can't live your life like that. So this is where the extroversion comes in, because you have to still navigate through this world. And Jay and I were talking about this earlier, about navigating a world that maybe is not built for you. Now, the world is built for extroverts, right? It's built for people who are in your face. I mean, I really think of sometimes some extroverts to me are just like that scary clown at the fun house at the carnival. It's like, get away from me. The world seems to be built for those kinds of people sometimes. All the celebrities and the influencers and the people that are just in your face or in social media, or just making a big to do. And it can be hard to deal with. So, but the thing is, they're out there and we have to work through that world anyway. We have to live in that, we have to share that same space. So how do we get through that? And I kind of think of it as like, if you're a nudist, you still have to go to the grocery store, right? So you got to put some
That is
clothes
a
on,
great analogy. Oh my God.
right? You have no shoes, no shirt, no service. They didn't say anything about pants, so I don't know, but most people will put on pants to go to the store, right? Well, a
One
nudist
would
is going to
hope.
be, yeah, let's hope. Nudists are still going to be nudists at home or wherever they go to do their nudistry, but they
What an
still have to go
image.
get food. So yeah, so for me, being an extrovert is not like something I want to be. I don't want to be the funhouse clown. I really don't. But I do want to be my full self. And I do want to be able to navigate through the world and not feel like I can never leave my bed and my covers and my coziness. I want to have some tools to navigate, right? And so some things that I did, I think learning these extra tools maybe as to become an extrovert, but to move through that extroverted world, I think it's not really a sellout. It's just a skill set, right? It's just some little tips and tricks that you can hack, that you can teach yourself so that you can grow as a human being. Um, so some of the ways that, accidentally or on purpose have helped me. When I was a kid, I was always in choir. And it turns out I had a decent enough voice that when I became a teenager, which is, really a time to be an introvert, right? Oh, just everyone go away. I was always kind of that weird goth girl that just kind of wanted to hide in the corner anyway. But I had a decent enough voice. And so the choir director would have me sing solos. Okay, so performance art, super scary, right? I mean, you're up in front of people, you're very vulnerable, you're singing, you hear the cracks in your voice and stuff. But you do something like that enough, you you end up having enough confidence to be able to do that. It's not like you like it necessarily, and I'm used to it now, but it's a good skill to have, even if, I mean, I'm not out singing or anything now, but being able to just get up in front of people and projecting that portion of who I am, as hard as it was, and I'm saying it's hard for sure, it's allowed me to be able to get up and be around people, just period, you know, and be able to, when called, be able to stand up and say, okay, I can do this, because if I can sing in front of people, which I think is scary, then I can speak, or I can just present myself in this space where everyone is just like so extroverted, right? So that was one thing. And then I'm a poet, and the one way that you share your poetry is you have to read it out loud. I mean, it's more performance art than any other kind of writing, unless you're talking about lyrics, which is a kind of poetry, right? But it's set to music. So for me, going to open mics and then not only just reading out loud in front of people, but reading out loud your own work that you wrote, which puts you up for judgment, and it makes you vulnerable again. But you have to learn how to do that, again, if you're going to be a poet. I mean, you don't have to. I guess you could write. A lot of poets do this, actually. They write and they have their little books, and not little books, they have beautiful books, but they never share them out loud. But it's kind of a shame, because it's really special to hear a poet read their own work out loud, and to hear what they meant by the words that you can follow along reading on the page. There's a lot of power in that, actually, I think. So so learning how to do an open mic and go up there and just read something, and I have a shaky leg, I have this neurological thing, my leg shakes, and so now I've learned to just get away from the podium, even because it's so easy to lean on it. But if I do that, my leg will start shaking. And instead, I grab the mic and I walk across the stage with the mic. And then I don't have to deal with my leg anymore, because then the leg takes all the attention. And I want people to hear my words. I don't want them to notice my shaking leg. And so poetry, yeah, so that was something that I learned. And part of how I learned that was taking a class in devised theater, which is kind of like improv, but it's all kinds of creative stuff. And I can't even really describe it, but it forces you to get up on stage and just pull things out of the back of your head and just perform with a group, with intention. And it gets rid of that, sense of, that comfort, the comfort level that you want to be inside, you know? So for me, those were performance art of some kind or other has really helped me. And as a writer, I need to know these tools. You can't really be an artist of any kind and not know how to, I mean, you can. You can be an artist and you can hide in your cave, which I called that my office, my cave, right? And my parents even called my bedroom the cave, because I was always in my cave, right? It was always dark. The windows were closed, the drapes were pulled, and I was always making something. It was my cave, right? Is very comfortable in there. But, part of the act of making is also sharing that. And if you can't share it, then you're stunting yourself. You're making for a reason. And it really, times it can be just for yourself, for healing or for expression, or, stress relief or whatever. But a lot of the times you make something that you want to share. And so you have to learn how to share it. And that means taking on some of those extroverted qualities. You know what I mean? So, and then I would say the other thing that really helped me was being forced to be face to face with people by being a bartender. And
I was not expecting you to say that. I'm not
yeah,
gonna
totally different
lie.
left turn in Albuquerque, right? I mean, but I was a bartender. I worked in food service. I put myself through college, so I worked, and eventually figured out that bartending was like the easiest work to do for the least amount of work to do. I mean, the easiest money to make, doing the least amount of work. So
Work
I would pick
smarter,
up.
not harder, right?
There you go. Yeah, and I didn't even know that I was learning it at the time, but yes, absolutely. And so I would take all these shifts that were daytime shifts, which are always slower, except for that little lunch bump. And then, I'd check out by the time it gets really busy at night, because that would be way too much. There's no way I could handle that. And I would just hang out, and you have this 6-foot expanse between you and another person. And so you can learn how to deal with different kinds of people. You don't know what you're going to get, but you have literally the law behind you in case you have to tell someone to go away, which is super empowering. You have your bosses there because they don't want to lose their license, they don't want any trouble. And then you have, your staff, which is we're all there kind of supporting each other. It's kind of an interesting culture working in restaurants. So yeah, bartending actually was, you learn how to have these small talk conversations with people. You learn what the boundaries can be and how they can kind of change depending on how frequent that person is that comes to your bar. Um, you also learn one thing you really learn is who's worth spending any time on and any energy on. Because at the end of the day, what you're doing is transactional, right? You're providing a service and they're paying you for it, and you're making tips off of that. So you learn really quickly, is this person here going to be worth all this energy that I have that, I covet and I have to protect? And so bartending, oddly enough, has been like a great occupation for teaching me extroversion skills. So and I know there are other ways, but those are the ways that I've been able to learn how to be face to face with people. I did have a job for a while where I was for 10 years I worked as a sleep technologist and a sleep health educator. And that was face to face, very intimate, because you're with someone overnight while they're sleeping. It's very intimate. You have to be able to look them in the eye and talk to them, and it can be really scary. But that bartending, I'm telling you, and they even said when I was in school for that some of the best people to be sleep technologists are people who used to bartend. There you go.
Wow, that's amazing. So it sounds like with pretty much all the situations that you described, like, being on open mic and singing and talking, like being able to walk on your leg to prevent it from shaking, and bartending, all these different things, like the through line that I'm picking up on is that you almost like put yourself into the situation where you had to just like throw yourself to the wolves, and like you proved to yourself that you were able to just stand up and do it no matter what happened or what came at you.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not saying it was easy at all, because it's not. It's
Right.
really not easy. It is super not easy. And still to this day, I have anxiety about certain, I've got to go and do this thing and have to be in front of people. But I also know that, okay, you can do it. And your description of throwing yourself to the wolves is perfect, because that's the way it always felt when I was getting trained to work at a job at a restaurant. It's like, here you go, here's your checkbook and your apron and your uniform, and then boom, you're just out there and you're like, oh my God, I have to go talk to these people and ask them questions and then remember what they said and do everything all in the right order.
So would you call yourself like very goal oriented, because it's like you know what you're trying to accomplish? Like, I want to get the tip. I want to prove to myself that I can use my voice and people will listen.
Oh my gosh,
I want to
yeah.
do X, Y, Z, and I will make myself extroverted if that's what I have to do to get to where I want to go.
Yeah, that, I'm so glad you brought those things up. At one point as a young woman, I got tired of being always shoved into the corner and being quiet and not having a voice, especially because I'm a writer. And then what is a writer but a person with a voice who writes it down, who has stories to tell and something to say.
That's
And so
beautiful.
there's something that comes with, feeling invisible, being made to feel invisible as a kid, especially, or as a person who is not white, straight, male, wealthy, all the things, right? Able,
Right.
With ability, whatever. Um, when you're outside of that, when you're in the margins and stuff, oh, man, it can make you so angry that you're outside of what the world is built for, like we talked about earlier. But I just decided that, okay, I can take this energy that is not healthy to bottle up, right? And I can turn it into my art. But in order for me to turn into art that matters, that I can get out into the world, I'm going to have to step into this universe that I don't really necessarily like or am comfortable inside. That's okay, because at the other end of it, I'm the winner and someone else is the winner, because if I'm writing, I'm usually writing to be helpful. I mean, that's something, I've been a writer since I was 4. I wrote my first complete sentences and stories when I was 4 years old. And
Wow.
at that moment, I mean, I am the luckiest human in the world, really, because I knew what my purpose was when I, at that age, my role, I remember specifically, I had a piece of orange chalk in my hand. I was writing on the chalkboard in preschool, which hardly anyone did back then, but I was in preschool. And my teacher asked me to write on the chalkboard, and I wrote a complete sentence, and I thought I was in trouble. And they're like, no, you're not in trouble. This is really awesome. So I realized, oh, this is who I am. But, in order
Wow.
to do,
I had
I
the
mean, how
chills.
lucky. I mean, I think about it. I've been a writer for 54 years.
That's
I mean,
amazing.
That's
isn't
awesome.
that crazy? So how lucky, I mean, really, for a lot of reasons, I could talk forever about how lucky I am to know at least one purpose. I think we have more than one in our lives, but that's a big purpose for me. And the purpose is not just to write, but to write to make the world a better place in some way. So that
Hmm.
means, and so until I recently retired, I was writing columns for people who with multiple sclerosis or sleep disorders or whatever, and sharing my personal experiences, but also, information to help people understand their conditions and try to make their way through the world in spite of the obstacles, because there are so many, and how to have a sense of humor about it and stuff. And I really felt like, oh, I'm doing the thing that I thought I was going to do when I was 4, and I'm doing it 50 years later.
And you're getting
It's just,
paid for it.
and I'm
That's
getting
Exactly.
paid
That's the
for
amazing.
it.
important part.
Yeah, there's
That's
some value
beautiful.
add, right?
So
And
all you
so,
had to do was step out into that big,
yeah,
scary, ugly world and
yeah,
you kick down all the obstacles and
yeah.
just
Use that
make
anger,
yourself
right?
known. Yeah.
Yeah, use the anger, use the fear and the anger, and say, okay, I'm going to turn this into something like, you know, some kind of currency that I can use to get my way through this world in a way that allows me to share the thing that I did. Because to me, I can't write something and not want to share it. To me, that it doesn't make sense. Now, I understand for a lot of people, writing or creating is very personal,
Hmm.
and they don't ever want to share it, and that's super cool. I mean, it's just like it's super cool to be an introvert. It's just who you are, right? It's just
Yeah.
who you are.
It's your
So
wiring. Like,
yeah, it's your wiring. So just, go with it, enjoy it, make the most of it, right? But for me, I need to share that. And so in order to do that, I have to do those other things that are not so great. But it's just part of that's the way that I can grow. And without being able to put myself out there, I think I would be way more frustrated. So it's
yeah,
worth it. It's worth the putting up with the garbage.
absolutely.
That's
Because you
the other
spend so
side.
much time like feeling like I could imagine. Was there ever a time where you were writing and not sharing? Because I can imagine how
Yes.
exhausting that must have been and painful that must have been to feel like
Yeah.
you're writing and you're screaming and nobody hears you.
Oh my gosh. That is, it can be so demoralizing, actually.
Right. Yeah.
So I started out going to a lot of different critique groups, which is I highly recommend for, anybody who's writing, to find your people, find the writers who understand you and want to support you and can give you good feedback, because it becomes more than just critique. It becomes like a second family. That's what I call my people. They're second family, because they understand what my goals are. They respect what I'm trying to do. They give me really decent, useful feedback without that's very respectful. And then they cheer me on, right? We all need that. So, but there was a time when I got burned out on critique groups because I wasn't in the right one. And so I stopped for a long time. And then I was just writing in this like weird limbo, this like space where there's nobody else around. And without that feedback, I still managed to like push some work out into the world and it got published or whatever. But it's not the same. And so, and then the other part of that is that you just feel so isolated and alone, which is not bad if you're an introvert, except that you want to share. So how do you get this out in front of people? And it is frustrating, and it's kind of depressing, really, when you're stuck with just what you feel like I have these gifts to give, and like nobody, there's nobody to give them to or whatever. So I did finally get back into critique groups during the pandemic, actually. And I've been with one for almost 3 years. They're amazing. And then I'm in another one that's been going on for more than a year now. And they're amazing. And then I occasionally get into some through a writing workshop or something that I take. And now I'm making myself go to more open mics just to like be around my people, because there's so many poets, especially. We're all introverts, we're all awkward and like we don't want to be here, but so compelled to share. I mean, these are my people, right? So yeah, I am kind of goal oriented in that way. And I think it's also just for me, for my own mental health, I need to take the frustration and the depression and the anger and the feeling of being powerless, sometimes, and find that all up and turn it into like energy that I can spin into my work and share it out. Um, and so yeah, again, so that just means I have to, you know, it's easy to wallow. And it's funny, a friend of mine, Jeff, and I were talking about this, how there's just so much wallowing happening in social media among different people. And I
Oh,
mean,
yes.
so much lately.
What
Oh
do you
my
mean by
gosh, it's been
wallowing?
wallowing. I mean,
Are you sure you want to
talk
go
about,
down that road?
yeah,
Listen,
really.
look, I internet with a purpose, so I don't know.
Yeah. No, good for you. And that's good for you. That is the solution right there. When you go into social media and okay, we all have bad days. I get it. I have plenty. I just had a whole weekend of bad days. And it's okay to share a little bit, but it gets to the point where it's like,
You're
okay, let me
dumping
put
on
it to you.
people.
You're dumping. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's total like trauma dumping, kind of. It's like, oh, this is all happening to me, and then it just never goes away. And then when people send you good messages and happy flower memes and things because they're trying to help you be happier or cheer you up or do the kind thing, then that gets rejected. And you're like, do you really want to get better? That's what I mean by the wallowing. And I don't
Okay,
know
so
what,
you're sharing without the intention of wanting to be helped. You just want to like
yes,
complain, and
complaining.
but you
Yeah,
don't want to receive anything
yes.
positive.
So it sounds like you just want attention in a way.
Attention, yeah, and probably they need it. I mean, emotionally they need, there's some
Yeah.
emotional need for that, and I get it, because I mean, I get, I have those days too. And it actually, what it reminds me of is early on in my own, when I was diagnosed with MS in 11 years ago. And for like 2 or 3 years I did some wallowing. I did it.
Hmm.
We all do it. And what I call it going to the basement now. And when I see friends kind of taking that dip, I say, hey, you're going to the basement. It's okay. Check out what's in the fridge, but then come back up.
I like
Because
that.
you can, you know
I'm
what I mean?
obsessed with that.
I
Like,
like
oh
that.
my
I'm
God,
gonna steal that. I'm
Tamara.
gonna steal that. Hey,
Go
Steph,
for
how
it.
you doing? I'm good.
Take
And
it.
I'm in the basement today. I don't know.
Yeah, you're in the basement. Yeah. So that's sort of like maybe an introvert might say, maybe when they're wrapped up in their cozy, just because it's a great, hygge kind of day, maybe what it is they're actually in the basement. You need to come back out. Okay. Basement's good. It holds all the dark things. I mean, we could go on about like things like shadow work or whatever, more psych things, but the basement is where we go when we're not feeling great. And when you're getting diagnosed with something, that was the situation for me. A lot of times people will get into that kind of diagnosis mind where they're told, this is who you are now. This is who you are now. You've been diagnosed with whatever. Could be MS, could be autism at a late age. It could be, a sleep disorder that you can't overcome. It could be a lot of things. Um, then you suddenly take that on as an identity. It's like you put on a hat and
Mhm.
suddenly that's who you are, and you wear it down in the basement and then you never come back. And
Wow.
I've had friends who were diagnosed with, friends that I knew personally who were then diagnosed later with MS. It kind of is more common where I live, and have seen them go down to that basement and just be there. And it's important to go there. I mean, it's a grieving process that they're going through, right? Um, and and you have to go through all those stages of grief, right? But again, at the end, you have to pick yourself up and you need to come out of the basement and see the sunshine again, and maybe even go outside and see someone face to face out in the nasty world.
Wow, what a beautiful analogy. Oh my
I
gosh.
hopefully that helps people.
Yeah, no, I
I,
love
I think
that.
that
Like,
I think that's definitely going to help somebody.
I hope
what?
so.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's my mind is like in a pretzel right now. Like that's just
Oh,
but like in a good way. It actually
yeah.
no. Correction. My pretzel of a brain when it comes to like all of this stuff is untwisting.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Oh,
Like
I'm
that's
so glad to hear
beautiful.
that. Well,
Yeah.
I think also another comparison, if it helps at all, is that we as a culture seem to really value the early bird person, the person who gets up early and is get, getting ready to go and getting things done. But you know
Hmm.
what? So many of us are wired to be night owls, myself included.
Right. And some of
Um,
us are depend on the day, like me.
Depends on the day, depends on the weather. For me, it's like even the weather
Hmm.
because it gets so dark up here in Seattle, and
Yeah.
those dark days they take me out sometimes. It's
Yeah.
rough, especially over the winter. Um, but the social world is sort of built on this extroverted idea that, of capitalism and efficiency and productivity and go, 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 do, be, at 9 a.m. sharp. And it's like, oh, some people are just, we're up at 2 in the morning writing the next great American novel. How dare you tell me I have to go to work at 9 a.m. in the morning, you know? And so
Right.
it's a
Uh,
weird, and then school too. And I think I speak about this because I'm really a big I'm really big fan of starting school later. They
Hmm.
didn't School used to start much later, like at 9 a.m. But then somewhere in like the 60s or 70s, somebody had this great idea that we need to start it earlier because let's get it done. Boom, 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 right? It's that extroverted
Right.
mindset or that early bird mindset. But teenagers in particular cannot even be awake at that time of day, and they're expected to be dressed and at school and awake. And so there is actually circadian science that shows how useless it is to make our kids, especially our teenagers in junior high and high school,
yeah,
to go to school that early. But it's the same
Right.
thing. If
I
we're going to
remember
put
that.
our, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so
I
I,
was well child. I went to start school in the 80s and 90s, but yeah, I remember school started at 9 o'clock, and then
Was it
right,
because women started entering the workplace more maybe and
it
like they
could be.
needed daycare options?
I think you're absolutely
yeah,
onto something there. I mean, there was definitely shifts. I was in high school in the 80s, yeah.
Hmm.
And that was a new thing. It was still a new thing for moms to be gone. And of course, we were the latchkey kids and all of that, right? So I'm sure that had something to do with it. So again, capitalism, economics. I
Hmm.
mean, it comes back productivity. Let's do everything efficiently. But
Right.
efficiency is not really great for being a human being, a fully fledged human being.
No.
We're not, I don't know that we're meant to be efficient, especially if we're creative. I think creativity is, we're meant to be super messy and,
Right.
weird and
Right.
introverted. And I don't think that um, the ways and means of a person who's creative and wants to pursue that throughout their life um,
Absolutely.
are really doable in the way our society is structured. So we were always having to fight, to get through and get our work done so that we can share it out in the world. And of course, going back to but we're all introverted, but we have to like walk that extroverted line to get to the other side. I mean, think about it. We're like little mice. We're at the edge of a river, and we need to
Hmm.
get to the other side because that's where all the people are that are the other mice that have the cheese or whatever. Maybe you have the cheese. You need to give it to them. So you can't cross the river because the tides and the currents, it's all too deep. So you just not go, or do you say, okay, I'm going to go up the river ways where it's a little more shallow, and I'm going to make me find a little leaf, and I'm going to ride it over across the river and get to the other side. And it's going to be really freaking hard. And I'm going to be scared to death, and I might even drown. But if I get over to the other side, I have the cheese. And then everyone's going to be happy. And then I'm going to be happy because I did my thing.
That is,
So,
your analogies are unreal. Wow, I mean, you
oh,
are a writer. That's amazing.
that's a right. Yeah, that's a writer's mind. I'm always thinking in terms of metaphors.
Oh
I
my
kind of do
gosh.
it all. But, so that's why I say, enjoy and savor and appreciate your own introversion, because there's power in that.
Hmm.
But you can still grab some of those tools, because it will in many ways help you to just grow and be a better you, in
Right,
spite of how the world may want to shape you. you know
right.
so that's all I'm saying. And so that's how I think you can be an extroverted introvert, is to really stick to your introverted dreams and
Hmm.
desires and all the things you want, but go and steal some of those life hacks from the extroverts just to get through the maze
And through the day.
and through the day. Yeah, yeah. You're even through the hour sometimes, I'm
Yeah.
telling you. Oh my gosh. It
So
can say
oh no, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it can really sap a lot of energy even just on the hourly. I get it.
Oh yeah. I'm curious though if so I know for me, in my experience, and Jay, I'm curious about your thoughts as well.
Mhm.
But in my experience, I had to sort of go inward and learn to accept all these introverted qualities about myself before I could just show up in the extroverted world and be like, this is who I am, accept me as I am, or like F off. Um,
Nice.
but I'm curious, like, what did you have this like internal journey of like having to go through this like self-acceptance phase before you were able to come out of the basement? Or
Yes.
were you just able to come out of the basement like from the get-go?
Oh no, no, no. I had to do the work. Oh, you have to do the work. And so for me, I'm really interested in psychology.
Hmm.
And so I definitely really appreciate Carl Jung. Obviously, I like archetypes and
Hmm.
metaphors and all of that. That fully makes sense, right? Um, I had to do some work myself to understand what how I was getting in my own way, you know.
Hmm.
And I was doing this kind of self reflection at a time when I didn't even realize that it was like accidentally helping myself. I mean, I was just trying to find ways. I mean, I taught myself, okay, when I was 16, I did have a lot of anxiety in high school. When I was 16, I taught myself self hypnosis, not realizing like that's meditation. It's all these like
Wow.
things that are
Yeah.
part of like cognitive behavioral therapy that I learned when I was in like what I was 16, so that was 1981. No one was talking about that then. And I was just like, how can I get through this? And so I was just sort of seeking without realizing that I was just trying to heal myself or empower myself. And
Hmm.
so and then I would see other people who seem to have that agency. And I was
Hmm.
like, I want to be like that. I want to be someone who has agency. I don't want to
Hmm.
be the person that's just, I feel like I have something to say and something to share. And I'm not going to be able to do any of it unless I have agency for myself. And
Right.
I'm not sure if I ever really got to the place where I'm like, I'm here. And if you don't like it, screw you. I just, that goes against her. Think that's so awesome that other people are like that. I just feel more like, okay, I'm here and you're going to listen.
I love that. Jay, what was your experience like?
I mean, for me, yeah, I definitely had to do the work and look, and look inward to really accept who I was first before I could, have the world see me as I am. But and it's not easy because again, you think you're kind of taught and you begin to accept that something must be wrong with you because you don't operate the same way that everyone else seems to operate with ease. But you just, you get to a point where I was like, no, this is just who I am. It's all right. And like you, Steph, you can take it or leave it, but I'm going to be who I am. So once I got to that point, yeah, I had no problem showing up in the world as I am, as I am, and
Mm-hmm.
it gets easier. There's
Yeah.
still days where uh you wish it came easier, I guess, like that you wish it was easier to establish connections, or easier to just walk up to somebody and start a conversation. But for the most part, I'm definitely comfortable with who I am.
Mm-hmm.
One thing Tamara said that I definitely resonated with was the fact that so much of this world you're taught to be early. You know, then it just always bothering me because I've always been the kind of person to kind of do things in my own time because I just how I am, and it's worked out.
Nice.
And I always am reminded of the saying that the early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese.
I love that.
Yes.
That's
Me
funny.
too. You know,
Wow.
you this really brings up something for me. I think, and maybe it has to do just culturally and historically, but when I was 11 years old, this was 1976, and I lived in Colorado, and I went to this weird school that was like year round, and so I had to go to school in the summer. And it was in Colorado during the centennial of the state. And so we had this big centennial bash that we were putting together with the choir and acting and all the, all these things. And one of the songs we had to sing was Free to Be You and Me. And it sounds cheesy, but I think I really believed that. And I felt like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, dang it, free to be who I am. And one thing I have to say that is a good thing about social media, because it does have a lot of good things, I think, is
Mm-hmm.
that there's a lot of people speaking out saying, be yourself. You do you, you be you, whatever. Don't be afraid to be weird, be yourself, be authentic. And I think that word, especially authentic, is just so empowering. And so now
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, now that I've lived my whole life and I'm like in the second or third part of my life at this point, I'm 58, right? But I can actually really be comfortable being myself without apology and pursuing things that interest me, even if I'm not very good at them. I mean, I don't know how to make a film in the last year.
That's
Did that
awesome.
because I wanted to try it. And so I'm like, screw it. I'm gonna do it, and it's not gonna be perfect. And you know what? It's gonna be in a film festival in this summer. So
Awesome.
like,
That's
yes,
sick. Wow.
I
That's
know. I mean,
amazing.
it's like one of the biggest things that has happened to me in a long time. And it's just a little film. It's just a little video collage with a poem, and it's like not you know, high production values or anything. It's like I made it in Canva with my iPhone.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
but it
That's
made it. So I'm
amazing.
like, I did that. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep doing that and just have the audacity to just be myself.
Have the audacity to be myself. You should have a t-shirt line. Like, Jesus. I need to get Tamara Sellman quotes on a t-shirt.
Oh, you're so sweet. Oh, thank you. So
I
flattered.
love that. But yeah, I mean, and Jay, I kind of want to go back to what you like something that you said earlier, and it kind of ties into what you're saying as well, Tamara.
Mhm.
But you mentioned something about how, you just sometimes wish it could be easier for me, like it is for everybody else. But what was
Yeah.
coming up for me is like there are probably people that look at all three of us and think, oh, it's so easy for them to say all of this stuff. Like, it's so easy for them to like talk
Yeah.
about being authentic. Look how easy it is for them. But like, they don't know the journey that we had to go on to get here. And so when we look at people that we think it's easy to be them, like, for all we know, they went through hell and high water to get to where they're at. So I think that it's really important to just remind ourselves that like it's not easy to be anybody, really. We're all on our own journey, and like everybody's cuts hurt. Everybody everybody's wins are important. Like it's it's a unique journey for everyone, I think. And like
Mhm.
I think it's not easy for anyone. It just gets easier, hopefully, as life goes on.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. people will look at us and think, one, they'll probably think that none of us are introverts because we're on here talking.
Right.
Yeah, like I get that all the time. Introverts don't do this, introverts don't do that, and it's
Mhm.
always some non-introvert telling me what an introvert
Mhm.
is. I always find that hilarious.
Oh
But
my
Right.
God.
but you're so
Yes.
right. Like you don't know everyone's story. Like you don't know the journey. You don't know the work that they put in, the work that they continue to put in.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Hmm.
But everyone does have a story, and to Tamara's point, it's important for everyone to tell a story because everyone has their own story. And she was right that one of the good things about social media is that you're able to see so many people not just telling their story, but telling stories that are similar or the same for other people. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
you're establishing a connection, and someone's story can reach someone else, and that person can say, "Hey, you know what? That I see myself in that person. Like I'm not alone.
Yeah.
There's someone else
Mhm.
Yeah.
out there that understands or is going through what I go through." Um, but it's important to understand and see everyone's story, and not just assume that what they're showing you is in fact the actual story itself.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely. I
Absolutely.
love that. Love that. And it reminds me of a story one of somebody told me once where he is uh has ASD. So he's working in an office with three other people who had some level of autism or neurodivergence, and they'll work
It's
side by side
sorry,
in
just to interject, ASD is autism?
yeah, Asperger's.
Okay.
Yeah, Asperger's.
Okay, got it. I'm
Um
sorry.
yeah, yeah, that's okay because I mean now they call it all
Mhm.
Asperger's or
Okay.
autism. So let's just to be clear. Thank you.
Mhm.
And so all four of them had they were on the spectrum in some way. And so they were all working in the same cubicle and they would never even talk to each other face to face. They would text each other. And some people who are more extroverted might think, oh, that's just like so weird. But I used to text with this person. It was hilarious and super funny. I think sometimes introverted people, they just need a little space and a little bit of distance to think about what they're going to say before they say it. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
Mhm.
shouldn't we all maybe have a little bit of a buffer or a governor on what we have to say? And sometimes I think extroverts could probably learn a few things from introverts, like
Mhm.
twice before you say that.
Right.
So, and you're absolutely right. We're all sitting here talking and jovial and all that, but at the end of the day, talking to each other is not just the only. It's not about that for introverts. It's about managing the energy that's around us, I think,
Mhm.
and feeling like we can move through the space without being just overwhelmed. And I know for me, that's the big thing always. There's just so much overwhelm. So and an extrovert doesn't necessarily know that extroverts thrive on that, right? They thrive
Mhm.
on just overwhelm, like adrenaline and blah blah blah. And if extroverts would learn that introverts are actually just like them, they just don't need so much of it. That's really kind of to me the difference.
Right.
It is its own kind of spectrum, right?
Right. Everything's a spectrum. It's like how much or how little of everything can I take in my human experience? That's really all it is. And at the end of the day, we're all human. So like maybe an introvert can take more. I don't know. There's things that we can take more of that extroverts need less of. And like, I think if we all just like relate to each other that way and just
Hmm.
understand that some people need more of this and less of that, and I need more of less of this and more of that, like we're all kind of just figuring out life as we go. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And yeah, if we could all just everyone is different no matter what has happened to you. We're all going to have different experiences, different access to help, even different resources, different childhood, different working environments, different family situations. All of these things are shaping us. And so it's really unfair to like do the sweeping generalization, right? That all introverts or even all extroverts are this way or that. It's just
mhm.
everyone's just a little bit different. And I think, like Jay was saying, all these discussions online where people are sharing a little bit about who they are. This really empowers us all to like maybe understand ourselves a little bit better and maybe be a little bit more compassionate toward the next person,
Mm-hmm.
realizing, oh, that person. I mean, I posted something yesterday in Threads actually, and it had to do with dysphoria, body dysphoria, because I kind of have that. We were talking earlier, I really have a hard time seeing myself in an image, and it's not like a self-esteem thing. I think I look fine. It just doesn't look like the person who I think I am, and it's a weird trick of my brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I explained that, someone said, "Well, thank you. I learned something new today." Well, there you go. Now that's not wallowing. That's just saying, here's this thing that happens to me. Wacky, I know, weird, but
Mm-hmm.
it's what it is. And so here I am. And now someone knows something more than they did before. And so, I mean, it's safer in many ways in social media to share yourself, because you have the screen, you can always pull it down again or whatever. Way safer than
Right.
face to face. So I think,
Absolutely. It's
yeah.
so cool to just be able to like I use Threads sometimes to just like write down a story, like a little anecdote from my day. And it's so cool when people are like, wow, I thought I was the only one, or wow, I've experienced that too, or I feel so seen. And I'm like, oh, I thought I was just a weirdo, but okay.
No, yeah, no, you're not a weirdo. It's really good. And so two things happen, right? You share your thing and it helps somebody else. So that's a dopamine hit for you. And
Hmm.
then you both find out you're taking the risk, right? You're saying, yeah, I'm kind of a weirdo. I do this weird thing. Okay. You're kind of like biting your nails. Hopefully people aren't gonna think I'm weird. Then someone says, "It happens to me too." And so suddenly they just like totally said, you're fine too, because it happens to me. And then you're like, oh, I'm not so weird after all.
Right.
I mean, everybody wins.
Right, exactly. And then
So
in Jay's case, you do that, and then somebody buys a t-shirt, and now they have a t-shirt to wear, uh, to like further that message that, hey, I
yeah,
do this too. And now somebody on the street who sees them walking around in New York City or Boston or Seattle wearing that shirt now sees that and feels more seen. So it,
yeah.
Exactly. Since phillyandintrovert.com, shameless plug.
There you
there you
go.
go.
You
I
go for
teed you
it. Go
up
for
for
it.
that one. You're
I appreciate
welcome.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Um, yeah, well, this has been such an awesome conversation. I could talk to
So
you
much
for
fun.
days, Tamara.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I want all of your quotes on the t-shirt, honestly.
Feel free.
Jay.
Feel free. Happy
Uh,
to
Don't worry.
share.
This is being recorded, so don't worry. We got it.
I
We got
love it.
records.
So Tamara, I know that you're working on some really cool stories right now. So why don't you, before we
Yeah,
like wrap up, why don't you tell
sure.
our listeners where they can, like, what you're up to?
Yeah. So you can always find everything I'm up to because I'm always got my finger in some pie at rhymeswithcamera.com. That's my website, rhymes with camera, all one word, lowercase. And that's my website, and I have a blog there and links to all the things. But currently, I am still I have a book of poetry called Intention Tremor, and it's about my journey dealing with a new chronic illness diagnosis and the 5 years following my MS diagnosis. And it's prose and poetry, and it's just talking about going to the basement and coming back out again, basically. And
Wow.
so 100% of the proceeds for that go to a really cool nonprofit called the Accelerated Cure Project. And they're all about just squashing together all the data they can find to help accelerate MS research. So, and then I have a new book coming out. I'm so excited. It's a short story collection called Cul-de-sac Stories, and it's coming out by Aqueduct Press in July. And I'm a speculative fiction writer. I like to write kind of weird stuff, and I own my weirdness, right? And it's coming out, and these are stories that are sort of like kind of a commentary on how we think of cul-de-sacs as being safe spaces, but really the world isn't necessarily a safe space like we thought it was. And so maybe it kind of even aligns a little bit with what we're talking about today, how the world is scarier than than we often realize. And there's a little bit of a feminist thread to it, but there's some science fiction in there, some pieces that might even venture into horror, and a lot of magical realism. So, and it's pretty good showcase of just all the different kinds of things I do. I like to experiment with all kinds of storytelling formats and stuff. So it'll be a good taste and sampler of what kind of writing I do. So I'm super excited that that's coming out in July.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Wow. Oh my God.
Thanks.
You really were born to be a writer. I love that.
Well, I put on that hat and it's still there. So I'm pretty much gonna die with that hat on my head, and that's okay. That would be a life well lived if you ask me. So
That's beautiful. Oh my goodness. So, okay. Well, thank you so much, Tamara, for being on with us.
thank you
This was,
so much.
yeah, this is such an awesome conversation, and I'm so glad that we made it work. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, if you guys love this episode, let's see if I can get this right. I got this. Um, be sure we'll fill you in on the joke in a second. Tamara. Stop laughing. Okay. If you guys like this episode, be sure to rate it, review it, share it with a friend, and listen to it on all the podcasts. You're distracting me. Okay, I'm gonna shut up now.
You were there. You had it. You
You're
had it.
distracting me. Okay, Tamara, we can never get the ending because I always just get confused. I get in my head, or in this case, Jay makes me laugh. So
You were
that's
right
what
there. Just had, you were.
Should I try again? Should I try again?
Sure. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. If
Man,
you love
you
this
do it.
episode,
I can do it. It's up to you.
you can do it.
Okay. Hey, Jura fam. How you doing? I hope that you've enjoyed this wonderful episode of Stay Introverted Podcast with our wonderful guest, Tamara Sellman. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, rate, review. Tell us how much you loved it. And as always, stay introverted, fam. I don't know why I put on my whole quiet storm voice, but
Yeah, that was like very formal. I was like,
Right.
am I allowed to breathe right now? Like,
I don't know, but I like it.
I like it too.
Really good. Very
Thank
good. Good style.
Good job.
One take, Drake. Let's go.
All right, I think we should end it there.
On that note, everybody, stay introverted, and we will see you next time. Bye, y'all.
See ya. Bye.